The desert has a way of speaking if you sit long enough to listen. Not in words like ours, but in the language of wind scratching across stone, of sun painting the sand in shades of fire, of silence that carries both promise and warning. At dawn, the horizon bleeds from black into red, a slow awakening, as if the earth itself were breathing. A hawk circles high above, tracing lazy arcs in the morning sky. Below, a tumbleweed drifts, carried by a breeze too faint to stir the dust off boots. The world is wide, endless, and yet, in this particular valley, something fragile is at stake: land, water, pride, survival. And so begins the tale. Elias Graves rode into that valley with the kind of posture that comes from years of carrying bitterness in the bones. His back was straight, but his heart bent crooked. He was 30 by age, though dust and whiskey had carved older lines into his face. His eyes, gray as weathered stone, carried both calculation and emptiness. To those who had heard his name whispered across the frontier, Elias was known as a man who wanted what others held: land, cattle, coin. He wasn't the bloodthirsty kind, no, but he was the sort who'd trade another's tomorrow for his own comfort today. His horse, a bay gelding with a scarred flank, trudged wearily across the valley floor. Beside him rode Mason, a cowhand who clung to a whiskey flask the way a child clings to a mother's skirt. Mason muttered under his breath as they approached the cluster of figures waiting in the canyon's mouth. "Don't like this, Elias," Mason rasped, spitting into the dust. "Never trust folks who can vanish into rocks like shadows. They watch and they wait. That ain't honest." Elias didn't answer. His jaw flexed, his hand brushed the butt of his revolver, but his eyes stayed forward. The tribe had gathered not in anger, but in quiet strength. They stood at the canyon's edge, tall as the cliffs behind them. Among them, a figure stepped forward, a woman unlike any Mason had expected. Ayoka. Her name, though Elias did not yet know it, meant she brought happiness, but the truth was layered deeper than words. She was young, perhaps 22, yet carried herself with the poise of someone who had seen more winters than her age would admit. Her hair, black as raven wings, was braided with beads that glimmered in the morning light. Her gaze was unflinching, steady as a river stone. She was beautiful, yes, in the way desert blooms are beautiful, rare, defiant against hardship. But her beauty was not soft, nor meant to disarm. It was a beauty sharpened into armor, meant to hold her ground before men who thought her weak. The elder, Tawodi, stepped beside her, his face weathered like bark that had endured storms. His hand rested lightly on her shoulder, but it was clear she was the one chosen to speak. When Elias halted his horse a few paces away, Ayoka's eyes met his without wavering. The silence stretched, thick as the heat already rising off the stone. It was Mason who broke it first. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered under his breath, too loud for courtesy. "They sent a pretty face to do a man's work." A flicker passed across Elias's expression, annoyance, perhaps, or shame at Mason's disrespect, but he said nothing. Ayoka, for her part, did not flinch. She spoke, her voice clear, low, and steady. "The land is not for taking," she said. "It is for living. The water runs for all who honor it." Her words hung in the air, simple but carrying the weight of generations. Elias let out a short breath, almost a laugh, though no humor lived in it. "Water belongs to whoever can hold it," he replied. "Land to whoever can defend it. That's how the West has always been." Ayoka tilted her head slightly, like a hawk studying prey. "And how long," she asked, "does a man's hand hold sand before it slips away?" Mason snorted, muttering again. "Lord, she talks riddles." But Elias, he found himself listening. He had not expected this. He had thought her beauty a veil for weakness, but instead, she wielded words like blades. The sun climbed higher. Dust shimmered in the air. Their exchange became less about land and water, more about will. Each sentence was a step in a quiet duel, each gaze a test of strength. Elias found his mouth dry, though not from thirst. Ayoka did not look at him as others did, not with fear, not with admiration, but as if she could see the man beneath the dust and armor. And that unsettled him more than any gun. Tawodi spoke then, his voice carrying the depth of old rivers. Peace is fragile, like thin ice, like the skin of a drum. Strike too hard, and all music ends. Elias shifted in his saddle. Peace don't fill a man's stomach, he muttered. Ayoka's eyes did not leave him. Neither does war for long. The air grew still. Even Mason stopped muttering. For a moment, it was only the hawk above, circling, watching. And then Elias noticed. High on the ridges above the canyon mouth, shadows moved. Silent figures, warriors of the tribe, stood with bows drawn, hidden against the stone. Their presence was not loud, not boastful. It was a quiet reminder, like the weight of a knife hidden in cloth, that Elias was not the one in control here. His hand brushed his revolver again, then fell away. He understood the message. Mason swore under his breath, eyes darting nervously. "We're in a pit of wolves," he whispered. "Ain't no way out." But Elias kept his gaze on Ayoka. Her expression was calm, unshaken, like a flame that would not bow to the wind. In that moment, though he would not admit it, Elias felt something shift. Not yet respect, not yet trust, but the first crack in the stone walls he had built around himself. The desert breathed again, hot and endless. The hawk wheeled above. The story had begun. The desert is cruel by day, but merciful by night. When the sun falls behind the mesas, the air softens, and shadows stretch like blankets across the sand. That evening, the valley lay hushed beneath a dome of stars, and a fire crackled at its center, spilling its light over two souls who sat across from each other, still strangers, yet bound by circumstance. Elias and Ayoka, the cowboy and the warrior. Two worlds pressed close by the heat of flame. Mason had fallen asleep, not far from the horses, whiskey still clutched in his hand. His snores rose and fell like a broken accordion, filling the silence with a coarse rhythm. Tawodi sat a little apart, his eyes half shut, humming a song that sounded older than stone. It was a song not meant for Elias's understanding, but for the earth itself. And so the fire's light belonged to the two who remained. Ayoka sat straight-backed, her braid sliding over her shoulder, her gaze steady on the flames. Elias leaned forward, elbows on knees, hat set aside. He studied her in the way a man studies a riddle he cannot solve. "You fight with words sharper than knives," Elias said at last, his voice low, half swallowed by the fire. "But words don't change the way the land bends. The river flows where it flows. A man either takes it or loses it." Her eyes lifted from the flame to his, and in their depths he saw the shimmer of something unyielding. "You speak of land as if it were a prize," she replied. "To us, it is not prize but parent. Would you put a noose around your mother's neck? Would you sell your father's breath?" Elias frowned, shifting, as if her words had struck something hidden. "Parents die," he muttered. "Land don't. Parents live in you," she said softly. "Land does too." The fire popped. Sparks danced upward, vanishing into the night. Elias stared into them, as if they might explain her riddles. His hand moved absently toward his shirt front. With a slow, almost reluctant motion, he unbuttoned it halfway and pulled the fabric aside. Across his ribs stretched a long scar, white and jagged, running from shoulder to hip. "Got this in a land deal gone bad," he said, his tone half jest, half confession. "My own brother sold me out. Left me with this. Left me with nothing but dirt." Ayoka's eyes lingered on the scar. She did not look away in pity, but in recognition, as if the mark were a language she already spoke. Without a word, she turned her arm toward the light. Beneath the sleeve, just above the elbow, a dark scar curved, deep and cruel. She touched it with 2 fingers. "Taken in an ambush. Raiders came when the moon was high. My brother did not live through it." Her voice held no tremor. "Scars are stories. We both carry them." For the first time, Elias felt silence not as a weapon, but as a bridge. Mason stirred, mumbling something crude in his drunken sleep. His words slurred together, "Pretty little dove, feathered thing, too soft for these hills." Elias's jaw tightened. He looked toward Ayoka, expecting anger, maybe insult, but her face remained calm, though her eyes darkened like storm clouds. "Pay no mind to him," Elias said quickly, almost defensively. "He's a fool with too much whiskey in his gut." A faint curve touched her lips, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement. "Respect is not taught in drink," she said. "It is taught in the heart." Elias found himself nodding, though he did not know why. Later, when Tawodi had finished his humming and drifted to sleep, the desert grew so quiet that even the breath of the horses seemed loud. Ayoka rose and moved toward Elias's horse, kneeling by its side. The animal's leg bore a small cut, a wound from a jagged stone earlier in the day. With hands steady and sure, she cleaned the wound, murmuring to the horse in her own tongue. Elias watched. The horse, usually restless even with him, stilled under her touch. "You've got away," he said quietly, almost to himself. She did not look up. All creatures trust when they are met with patience. Even men. He felt those words sink into him like water into dry earth. The fire dwindled lower, turning from flame to ember. Shadows grew, wrapping around them like cloaks. Elias leaned back against a rock, eyes on the stars above. "Funny thing about the sky," he said. "No matter how far man rides, it's always the same sky staring back at him. Makes you wonder if he's moving at all, or just walking in circles." Ayoka followed his gaze upward. Her voice softened, carrying something almost like tenderness. "The sky watches us. It waits to see if we learn. Circles are lessons. They bring us back to what we left unfinished." Elias turned his head toward her, meeting her eyes in the dim glow. There was no sudden spark, no lightning strike of romance, only the slow, deep pull of recognition. But the night was not only theirs. From the cliffs above, unseen eyes watched. Rival cowboys, men owed coin by Elias, men who carried grudges sharp as knives, had trailed him into the canyon. Their whispers floated on the wind, too faint to catch, but their intent hung heavy as storm clouds on the horizon. Ayoka sensed it before Elias did. She glanced toward the ridges, her brow furrowed. Her hand moved subtly to the knife at her side. Elias noticed. "What is it?" She shook her head, but her gaze lingered on the shadows. "Wolves circle," she murmured. "They always do." He followed her eyes, but saw nothing beyond stone and darkness. Still, unease curled in his stomach. The fire sank lower, until only embers glowed. Mason muttered in his sleep. Tawodi shifted beneath his blanket. The desert whispered through the rocks. And in that fragile silence, between two souls who had begun as adversaries, something unspoken grew. Not trust, not yet. Not love, not yet. But a recognition that the other carried scars, burdens, and strength the world had failed to see. They were not friends. They were not enemies. There was something in between, lit by firelight and shadow. And as the embers cooled, the night promised that their story was far from over. The desert does not warn before it strikes. One moment, the morning sky lay calm as polished stone. The next, thunder rolled, not from clouds but from hooves. Elias awoke to the sound of gunfire splitting the canyon air. Mason's curses followed, slurred but panicked, as bullets shattered rock and sent sparks into the dawn. He rose fast, revolver already in his hand. Ayoka was quicker still. She moved with the grace of a hawk startled from its perch, bow strung, arrow nocked, eyes fierce and unyielding. The ridges above, once only whispers in the dark, now spat fire and smoke. Rival cowboys, men Elias knew by face and grudge, had come to collect their debt, and they brought death as their bargain. The canyon became a storm. Bullets tore dust into the air, filling lungs with grit. Hooves pounded as horses screamed, scattering onto the chaos. Mason, half drunk, scrambled for his rifle but fell, fumbling in the dirt. Tawodi's voice rang out in their tongue, calling the tribe's warriors from the shadows. Like spirits rising from stone, they appeared on the ridges opposite, bows drawn, spears ready. The canyon floor became a battlefield of echo and dust. And in the center of it all, Elias, in Ayoka. He fired at shapes in the cliffs, the recoil jolting through his arm. She loosed arrow after arrow, each finding its mark with a precision that left Elias stunned, even in the frenzy of survival. Once a figure charged from the side, gun raised. Elias swung his revolver, too slow. The crack of a bowstring came first. Ayoka's arrow struck true, dropping the man before the trigger could be pulled. Another time, a bullet sang past Elias's head, close enough to take his hat. He turned and fired blindly. It would have been his last moment, but Ayoka shoved him aside, the shot meant for his chest burying itself in stone. For the first time in years, Elias fought not for gain, not for land, not for pride, but for the one who stood beside him. The battle raged until the sun cleared the canyon rim, spilling light across a haze of dust and smoke. Men lay scattered, some groaning, some gone. Horses bolted into the distance. Mason lay still on the ground, his flask cracked beside him, blood darkening his shirt. Elias stumbled toward him, but one look was enough. Mason's eyes stared upward, glassy, fixed forever on a sky that would not answer him. For all his flaws, Mason had been loyal. Elias felt something twist inside his chest, loss layered upon regret, sharp as the desert wind. A voice pulled him back. "Dear," Ayoka said, her hand tugging his arm. Her braid was loose now, hair tangled with dust, blood streaked across her sleeve, but her eyes were steady. She led him toward the cover of a narrow cave cut into the canyon wall. They crouched inside, breath ragged. The noise of battle dulled, though echoes still rolled through stone. Elias pressed a hand against his side. A bullet had grazed him, leaving a raw line of fire across his ribs. His shirt clung wet with blood. Ayoka knelt before him, pulling cloth from her satchel. "Hold still," she murmured. Her hands were firm, sure, not trembling. He tried to laugh, though it came out as a cough. "Funny. First time I've trusted anyone to patch me up since my brother." Her gaze flicked to his. "And yet you trust." For a moment, silence. Her hands pressed cloth to the wound, her face close enough that he could see the flecks of light in her dark eyes. The cave was small, barely wide enough for the two of them. Dust hung in the air, glowing in the thin beam of light that cut through a crack above. Ayoka leaned back on her heels, wiping blood from her fingers. Her own arm bled where a bullet had grazed her earlier, but she had said nothing. Elias noticed now, reaching clumsily for her sleeve. "You're hurt," he said. She shook her head. "Scars are old friends. They remind us we are still alive." Still, he tore a strip from his own shirt and bound the wound with hands rough but gentle. For once, she did not resist. The gunfire outside slowed, fading as the battle moved away. In the stillness that followed, something fragile grew between them. Elias broke it first, his voice low. "You said last night your brother was taken in an ambush. What was his name?" Her eyes softened, though her voice remained steady. "Nokos. He was younger, but brave. He thought the world would bend to kindness." A pause. The world broke him instead. Elias looked down at the dirt floor, his jaw tight. "My brother broke me too. Not with bullets. With greed. Left me to bleed for land he sold out from under me. Haven't trusted anyone since." Their eyes met again, and in that small cave, surrounded by blood and dust, they saw in each other not enemies, not strangers, but two souls carrying the same weight of betrayal and loss. The noise outside faded into silence at last. Only the whisper of the wind remained. Ayoka sat back against the stone wall, her bow across her knees. Elias sat beside her, revolver loose in his hand. For the first time since entering the valley, he felt no urge to claim, no hunger to take. He felt only the strange calm of sharing silence with someone who understood. When they stepped from the cave hours later, the canyon floor was quiet. The rival cowboys had fled, leaving bodies and smoke in their wake. Tawodi and the tribe's warriors moved among the fallen, tending to their own, gathering the lost. Mason's body had been covered with Elias's coat. Elias paused beside it, bowing his head, his hat pressed to his chest. "He followed me even when he shouldn't have," Elias whispered. "That's loyalty, more than I deserved." Ayoka watched him quietly. She said nothing, but her silence carried respect. That night, when the fire burned low again, Elias sat close to her. He did not touch her. He did not speak of love, but his voice was softer than it had been since the day he rode into the canyon. Maybe a man doesn't have to keep taking just to prove he's alive. Her gaze met his, calm as always, though a faint warmth flickered there. Maybe, she said. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the starlit sky. And though the storm had passed, Elias knew the choice still lay ahead. Would he remain the man he had always been, hungry, hollow, bound to pride? Or would he walk a new path, one carved not by greed, but by something gentler? The answer lingered in the night air, waiting for the dawn to decide. The desert keeps no promises. It gives water only when it wishes, shade only where stone allows, mercy only to those who listen. By the time the sun tilted low over Red Canyon, the desert had already chosen its stage for the last act. Elias knew it in his bones. He had seen too many ambushes, too many betrayals. The rival cowboys would return. Men hungry for land never stopped until hunger itself was burned from their bellies. The tribe knew it too. Tawodi's warriors prepared in silence, stringing bows, setting traps among the rocks. The air was tight as a drumskin. Even the horses felt it, stamping nervously, ears twitching toward the cliffs. And in the middle of it all stood Ayoka. Her face lit red by the falling sun. She looked carved from firelight itself. Braids loose, eyes steady, shoulders squared. She was not just warrior or emissary now. She was the heart of her people, the anchor holding them steady against the storm. Beside her, Elias stood. His revolver rested easy in his hand, not with arrogance, but with purpose. The old greed still lingered in him, but quieter now, like an ember fading beneath ash. For the first time, he felt the weight of something greater than himself. The enemy came with the setting sun. Hooves thundered across the valley floor, throwing dust into the blood-red light. Gunfire cracked, echoing through stone. The rival cowboys surged forward, a tide of steel and fury, determined to seize the canyon, to claim the water and land, to end both Elias and those who sheltered him. The tribe met them with silence first, shadows waiting in the cliffs. Then, with a cry like the call of hawks, arrows loosed into the dusk, raining swift and sharp. Horses reared, men cursed, the canyon erupted into chaos. Elias fired, his bullets answering the guns below. Ayoka moved beside him, bow singing, her form sure and unshaken. They fought not as enemies divided, but as two parts of the same rhythm. Her arrows cutting paths where his bullets found their mark, his gun clearing space where her courage pressed forward. For every step the cowboys gained, the tribe held firm. But the tide was heavy, relentless. Then it came. A shot cracked, louder than the rest. Elias felt the impact tear into him, fire spreading across his shoulder. He staggered, falling to one knee. The world tilted, narrowed. Ayoka cried out, not with fear, but with a fury that burned hotter than the desert sun. She moved before him, shielded his fallen form with her own, her bow discarded for the blade at her waist. Elias, gasping, lifted his revolver with his good arm. He fired again, the sound raw, desperate but true, and together they held the line. The battle lasted as long as the sun clung to the horizon. By the time darkness bled across the canyon, the enemy was broken. Those who could fled, leaving the fallen behind. The valley lay quiet again, heavy with smoke and blood. The tribe stood victorious. Ayoka knelt beside Elias, pressing her hand against his wound. His face was pale, his breath ragged, but his eyes remained steady on hers. "You should have left me," he whispered. "Would have saved your strength." Her gaze softened. "Strength is not for keeping. It is for giving." He managed the ghost of a smile, one corner of his mouth tugging upward. "Maybe I was wrong about everything. About land. About people. About you." Her hand lingered on his chest, over the beat of his heart. "Then let this be your new beginning." That night, under the blanket of stars, Elias lay among the tribe's camp. His wound had been bound, his body weak but alive. Ayoka sat beside him, silent as always, her presence steady as the desert itself. He did not reach for her hand, nor she for his. Yet between them stretched something deeper than touch, a thread woven from scars, survival, and respect. No kiss, no sudden vow, only the quiet promise of two souls who had seen each other clearly and found something worth carrying forward. The desert does not keep promises, but it keeps stories. And so this story lingers, carried on the wind that sweeps Red Canyon, of a cowboy who rode in with greed in his heart, and a warrior who met him with courage, of fire and gunfire, of scars and survival, of how even the hardest stone can crack when water seeps long enough, gentle and steady. For love, like water, does not always come in floods. Sometimes it comes as a single drop, patient, persistent, carving mountains in silence. And so, traveler, if you've listened this far by the fire, know this. The fiercest battles are not always fought with bullets, but with pride. The greatest victories are not in land, but in kindness. And the truest love is not the flame that burns fast, but the ember that glows steady, warming hearts through the long, cold night. If this tale found a place in your heart, leave your mark in the dust below. Tell me, from where do you listen to these Wild West whispers? Like this story, share it with another wanderer, and subscribe so the desert keeps speaking its secrets to you. The fire grows low now. The night deepens. The story ends. But the memory rides on.